So, as part of the World Bridge Tourism Project, preparing for the EU-China Tourism Year 2018, let's start with a short overview. What are the latest developments in China's outbound tourism? What are the main drivers? And of course, concentrating on what does that mean for Europe. So what we can see that in the first half of 2017, the Chinese outbound tourism has been recovering somewhat after there were some negative developments in 2016. The numbers in the autumn went down actually in many destinations. And we can also see on a global level that Hong Kong and Macau, which has been seeing negative development for the last 2 years, are back now, so they could get a slight increase in arrival numbers in the first half. So, but Taiwan still is suffering from a big loss. There were like 40% less visitors from mainland China to Taiwan in the first half of 17 compared to the year before. So what does that mean? That means that the overall growth rate for the first half of 17 moved up to 7.4%. It was last year, for the whole year, it was only 2.7%. So that doesn't sound a lot, but we have to be aware of the fact that visitors to Greater China, that is Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, in the first half of 17, that grew by 0.7% after it had been falling by 5% last year. But so if we take this out and only look at the rest of the world, so all the countries, all the destinations except Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, we still have 14.3% growth in the first half of 2017, so almost 15%. That sounds more comfortable, so I think it is clear to see the Chinese are still coming. So you can see on this slide an overview of the development since the year 2001, and obviously a strong growth. And you can see the blue color is the rest of the world, including Europe, of course. The red color is Greater China, and where it was some years ago, almost 70% of the trips just went to Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan. You can see now that more than half of the trips are going beyond Greater China. So for the first half 17, this becomes obvious, and you can also see the forecast of COTRI. So our forecast is that there are about 145 million travelers next year. So here you see the numbers in more detail. So for the first half of 2016, the first half of 2017 in comparison, so Greater China stays where it was at 32 and something, whereas the rest of the world moves up from less than 32 million to more than 36 million. In total, that means almost 5 million more trips in the first half of 17 compared to last year. And the forecast for the full year 2017 from my institute is that we will see Greater China growing by about 2.5%, whereas the rest of the world will grow by about 9%, totally growing 6%. So the numbers also, of course, what we have seen for July and August, and unfortunately also new incidents happening, we think will lead to a less slightly pronounced growth rate in the second half, but still we can see 76 million travels beyond Greater China. That means that China, even without calling Hong Kong, Macau, Taiwan, is the biggest market in the world, bigger than United States or Germany. And where are the people going? So on this list, on this graph, you can see, so Italy is still #1 destination, and France #2, Germany #3. So these are the numbers, arrival numbers for the first half of 2017. And we can see the long tail is getting more and more pronounced. So you have even smaller destinations like Hungary, more than 100,000 arrivals in half a year, or Poland, almost 60,000, and even small countries like Slovenia getting almost 30,000 arrivals from China in half a year. And in growth rates, it is even clearer that the trend is to move to a lot of the smaller European countries. So you can see for the first half of 2017, Serbia had a growth rate of 160%, more than 160%. Bosnia-Herzegovina, almost 100%. Montenegro, 35%. Poland, Croatia. Then Spain as the first big country, but also Estonia. Iceland, of course, very successful in the last few years. Czech Republic. So all the small countries are getting more and more interest from the Chinese. And in our webinar, we will try to explain how you can profit from this. So let's look now at some of these global drivers which have been changing the China outbound tourism in the first half of 2017, especially, of course, looking at what does it mean for Europe. And the first global driver is simplified visa procedures. So we can see that in many places in the world, the procedures for Chinese to get a visa have been very much simplified. So on this slide you can see there are actually 27 destinations now where Chinese can travel visa-free. So these are a lot of the Caribbean islands and also the islands in the South Indian Ocean, but also, for instance, in Europe, Serbia and San Marino, two countries in Europe. And on top of this, there are also 39 destinations where you have visa on arrival now for Chinese citizens. So a long list of Asian countries. You can see on the right-hand side a long list of African countries, and from Europe, it's Ukraine. So this is for Chinese much easier now for many countries to go there, which means they can travel at short notice. They don't have to wait for visa. And if we look at the European situation, so the Schengen countries especially have been opening a lot of more visa application centers, so it is easier now for Chinese to apply for visa in many different cities in China. But still, for leisure travelers, it is not easy to get a multiple entry visa for the Schengen area or other European countries. So certainly in the EU-China Tourism Year 2018, this will be one of the topics which will be discussed as we are in Europe more and more in competition with other countries where there's no visa or visa on arrival. So this is something certainly which will be talked about also in Europe. The next driver we can talk about is flight connections, so connectivity. So it is very impressive that in 2017, those already established and those already announced, more than 100 new air connections have been started or will be started in the coming months, connecting Chinese airports with airports outside of China. And most of this is connecting second-tier airports in China with second-tier airports in other countries. So this is a very impressive list. I'm sure you can't read all this now, but as we said, you can download all these materials in a few days from the website we will tell you at the end about. So then you can look at this in more detail. But you can see the sheer number of connections which have been added is enormous. And for Europe as well, fortunately, we have a nice list. So Belgium, Czech Republic, Finland, Italy, Portugal, Russia, Serbia, Spain, Switzerland, all these countries see new air connections which make it easier for Chinese to travel in more comfort, non-stop, to a number of European countries. The next driver is simply the fact that more and more information becomes available for Chinese travelers, because a lot of global destinations have been doing more and more and are doing more and more to give information to tour operators as well as to FITs, using social media or participating in fairs like the ITB China, which happened this year with a big European participation for the first time in Shanghai, using online trainings, using videos as a very popular way in China now to promote destinations. And of course also with each year the Chinese travelers get more experienced, so it's much more likely that one of your friends have already been to the place you think about traveling to. So you also get this peer-to-peer information more and more. So, and just one example here, that global, the company called Dragon Trail Interactive is checking on the activities on WeChat, which is the most famous and most important social media, of course, in China now. What are overseas national tourism organizations doing, and how many views they have, how successful are they? So they do this ranking every week. It's freely available, and you can see all the arrows are European NTOs. So there are, in the top 20, we have 10, so half of them are European countries, from Sweden, Norway, Britain, Finland, and so on. So this is something which has been increasing a lot in recent years, and obviously that helps a lot to make the Chinese know more and talk more about the different European destinations. And another driver is moving from quantity to quality. So famously it said, be careful what you wish for. And this is what now many destinations find, that they have, if they have concentrated on just large arrival numbers, so they have been successful in getting lots of mass market package tours from China, but they tend to stay only a short time, maybe just a few hours in one destination, and they concentrate on the most famous destinations and the most famous attractions within these destinations, and they come during the high season. So they create what is called now over-tourism. They create a lot of problems for the destinations, that they have to cope with this big numbers coming for a short time, and not much money is earned from that, so the yield is rather limited. And we can see globally some destinations have started to become really serious about this problem. For instance, Thailand has introduced, end of last year, a minimum price for tours, so that the tours cannot be too cheap. Palau, an island in the east of Guam, which was flooded by Chinese charter tour groups, have restricted the number of flights. Indonesia, for instance, is trying to promote other places in Bali, where 70% of all the Chinese tourists in Indonesia, they all go to Bali, so that they also disperse them to go to other places. And this is also reflected in the Chinese demand structure. So especially individual travelers from China, they are tired of traveling overseas and then meeting mostly other Chinese people. So a lot of Chinese travelers we talk to in our research say, I want to go to places where they are prepared for us Chinese visitors, and there are some Chinese people there, but not too many. We don't want to go to a place where everybody is Chinese. So, and we are looking for authentic experiences, for authentic offers, for getting closer to the places we are visiting. So, in Europe, of course, that means that many service providers, many attractions are actively seeking ways to attract Chinese visitors to other parts of their country, other parts of the European Union as a whole, and other times of the year. So this is what we are talking about. Of course, the EU-China Tourism Year 2018 will give a lot of support and will give a lot of opportunities for the engagement, especially of small and medium-sized enterprises, of less visited destinations in all EU member states, to follow this demand and provide services in this way. And this webinar is a part of the World Bridge Tourism Project, which is preparing for the EU-China Tourism Year 2018. And so we will try to help this, and we will present the 5 interviews I've been talking about earlier. So with 5 experts, which will share now with you their practical experiences